Nick Saban said he suspended an elite recruit for an incident and said specifically, quote, there is no wrong place, wrong time. Of course, Nate Oats' players have been at the wrong place in the wrong time in a shooting that involved the death of a young lady. Nate Oats is Alabama's basketball coach. Now, you wrote that, and you've told me that you think this was a blatant shot at Nate Oats, who Brandon Miller had borrowed the gun that was used allegedly used in the murder, and they specifically said the term "no wrong place, wrong time." Why do you think this is a blatant shot and just not a coincidence, Caleb?
Well, so just so we know, it's Tony Mitchell's the player that was suspended. It was apparently he was arrested for marijuana possession with intent to sell. And I think
talking about the football player.
Yes, the football player. I think it was a blatant shot for this specific reason. I think Nick Saban is very, very angry about the black cloud this has cast over Alabama athletics as a whole. And I think he's very, very worried that this is going to impact the football program to a certain degree. And look, I don't blame him for that. I'd be the same way if I were Nick Saban. So I got no issue with him doing it. So I think I'm not trying to say he's got nefarious intentions. I'd have the same intentions at this point. But what's going on in Alabama right now, you don't think that would be used against Alabama in football in terms of this is a culture within the athletic department. And I think he knows that this is possible. And I think he's trying to nip that in the bud immediately to let everybody know, no, this is not what we do here. This is not the football program. And by the way, Nick Saban has some pull. So don't be shocked if Nate Oats is in a little bit of trouble with the administration after it's very clear Nick Saban's not happy with them.
So are you saying that he would parrot information that he heard, or that he would get Nate Oats in trouble?
I'm saying that, I don't think he'd parrot information that he heard, or that he would get Nate Oats in trouble. I just think that this whole point yesterday, this was a little bit of grandstanding to let him know we don't do this at Alabama. We don't do this at Alabama football. And don't compare us with the basketball program. And I think he sent a subtle message to the athletic department, you guys need to deal with Nate Oats. Y'all need to deal with this because you're making us look bad as a program as a whole by not dealing with this situation.
I'm going to actually go in the other direction. I think that he probably was. He is far more educated as to the Nate Oats experience and what that basketball program is going through than either of us. So, listen, if this were a situation in which the administration came to him and say, I just think you should be aware because you're the most well-known person in the state. I think you should be aware that Nate Oats really did nothing wrong. Here's what happened. This is why we shouldn't have suspended Brandon Miller. I don't think you'd hear a peep out of Nick Saban. I think if they said, man, I'm not sure about the way Oats is handling this whole thing, and you might want to distance yourself, and worse things could be coming out, which could be the case. I mean, at the very least, there's going to be a murder trial, and you've kept your Alabama basketball program front and center at the NCAA tournament, and they're going to continue to be so as long as they keep winning, and different reporters are going to ask the same questions, which is why I said a long time ago that you should just suspend the season and see how this thing shakes out. Now, Alabama fans, jump on me. I'm fine with that. But morally, I think that was the right thing to do. Now, if Alabama survives this, gets through the tournament, wins a national championship, then maybe you're okay with that. But to me, especially in a football conference at a football school, you could have taken a much stronger stand. So I believe that this is somewhat orchestrated. I don't think it's nefarious at all. I just think it's, hey, this is not how we do things. And if you remember, Steve Spurrier at the time wanted to distance himself from some domestic abuse that was happening towards the end of his career. So he would say, hey, if you hit a woman, you're just not on our team. Well, I mean, that was orchestrated. He did that for a reason because other programs were allowing those guys to remain on their program. So I think it's very much like that. I think he wants to distance himself, like you said, but I also can't help but wonder if he's hearing that Oats could have handled this very differently, that this could be a big mess coming. So get away from it as far as you can. Those are my 2 thoughts.
That's very possible. He could be very privy. Look, we know over the weekend the New York Times reported, Alabama's denying it, but the New York Times reported that another player was involved in this. And
Yet another player.
Yes, another player was there. Alabama's denying it. I don't want to go here, but we kind of have to go here since we're talking about this. Reportedly, the player that was involved that Alabama is saying was not involved was one of the white players on the team. Do you know how bad of a look it is for the school if they were covering for the white player and not the other players, and how much that would be used against them in recruiting?
I haven't really thought of it even by race, to be real honest with you, Caleb. The way I look at it, though, is you have a program that at the end of the day, it is secondary to football. I mean, that's 90% of the revenue in a college athletic budget. Basketball is about 10%. We're talking about SEC schools, not Duke and North Carolina and those. But it to me was exactly what Smoky Mountain Red said. It was a recruiting pitch to make parents sure they know he isn't like that other coach. Yeah. And I think Nick Saban is the type of guy who's probably not going to like the basketball coach most of the time for a lot of different reasons, but he's got a legit reason not to like him now, because he is continuing through his winning at this point to bring negative attention to the University of Alabama. And Nick Saban didn't want any part of that at all.
Yeah, and I would ask Alabama fans this, because let's take this to its logical conclusion. If more stuff comes out that's problematic, which I'm kind of on your side on this. I think there's more there than we know about right now. So if more comes out and we find out the administration knew about this stuff with Nate Oats and was covering for it overall, that is a black mark for the whole school. That's going to hurt Nick Saban recruiting in football. So I would just ask Alabama fans this. Would you really sacrifice the long-term health of your football program just to go far one season in basketball?
Well, I've said the same thing when Tony Vitello was suspended early in the season. You have to do that because the NCAA's snooping around with the football program. Go ahead and suspend him. Make a statement. It wasn't an important series. It wasn't even an SEC series. But don't think that Nick Saban isn't thinking, man, if the NCAA comes sneaking around, they always find something. The NCAA doesn't show up and just finds nothing. Every program has things they would just as soon hide. So if they show up in Tuscaloosa and they're just looking at the basketball program, could they find something with football? Absolutely, they could. At almost any major program, Caleb, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Oh, absolutely. No, they definitely could. And they're not beyond coming down hard based on, this is one thing you could say to the NCAA in favor of the NCAA. They've shown throughout history, they're not beyond coming down on the biggest programs and the biggest coaches in the sport if they can find something on you. Now, their hands are a little bit tied a lot of times with these investigations, but this is the program that has come down. They've come down on Kentucky basketball plenty of times. They're in the Eddie Sutton years. They gave Alabama probation in football in the 2000s. I mean, this is not an institution that's going to turn a blind eye just because you're a major program.
Well, and don't forget this too. You have the NCAA who just added about 40 workers to their enforcement staff. I mean, they're trying to beef that up and bone that up before they just completely get lost and turn into the black hole of just nothingness, because the NCAA is fading away right now. It's the SEC and Big Ten that are taking control of football, and football is the driving chain. So, but the NCAA is adding people in enforcement. So don't think for a second they wouldn't want to make an example of. That's why I think that it's so important for Tennessee to get their NCAA stuff done. The NCAA at some point, if they're adding 40 staff members, then I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, they at some point are going to want to bust somebody big. And Tennessee would fit that mold. Alabama would fit that mold of just big schools that you could make a statement on and bust somebody big. So I'm not saying Tennessee or Alabama is going to be it, but that's the mindset they're in when you add 40 people, Caleb. You don't add 40 people to make coffee every day.
No, not at all. And let's not forget when you had the I call it the golden age of busting schools in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. I think a lot of that had to do with the NCAA got a backlash when they punished SMU, because a lot of people felt, I think rightly so, that at that time they punished SMU, but they weren't punishing Texas, Texas A&M, and all these other Southwest schools that were doing the same thing. And they responded to that by, like I said, coming hard at Kentucky basketball, coming hard at Alabama football, coming hard at Auburn football. Terry Bowden's first year, the Auburn went undefeated, couldn't play for anything. And they kind of made a statement because of the backlash they got for SMU, because I don't know how you felt. I think the problem with the SMU thing was they came down on SMU, and SMU was still playing players after they came down on SMU.
I think the problem with SMU is they wanted to try out this death penalty thing, and they weren't a big school. I think if Texas had done the same thing, that they wouldn't have come down on them.
Oh, yeah, there's too much money that Texas brings in.
Yeah.
And the thing about death penalties is when you do that, particularly not so much in Dallas, but in a place like Tuscaloosa, do you know how many businesses, restaurants, and hotels suffer if you come down with the death penalty?
Oh, it's huge. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
You really, and Tennessee would be one of those. You can't come down with a death penalty.
You trigger a recession in that city.
What is that?
I said you basically trigger a recession in that city if you do that.
Yep, it's true.